Welcome to Figure Feedback. My name is Jeremy, and this is the Elegoo Neptune 4 Plus 3D printer. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what my experience has been like using this printer, whether or not I recommend it as someone who's just starting out with 3D printing or as someone who has already been 3D printing for a little while. And I'm going to show you some of the things that I printed with this machine. Now, the Neptune 4 Plus is not a new 3D printer. In fact, it came out last year in 2023 in September. And if you want to purchase it today, you can for around $350, but you may even be able to luck out and find a sale or a coupon that will let you get it for a little bit less. And being able to get this 3D printer for under $350 is really good considering the build size that you get here. So we're talking 320 by 320 by 385 millimeters, which puts this printer among the helmet class 3D printers out there, which basically means if you wanted to make a full-size helmet that a grown adult could wear, you can make it on this printer. In fact, you can make a helmet that's so big it's not going to fit the majority of adults out there. And having access to that amount of build volume is a huge selling point for this printer. So now I'm just going to tell you straight up if I think that this is a good printer for you to use as a beginner. The answer is no, it is not. In my opinion, the Neptune 4 family of printers are not beginner-friendly 3D printers. Now that goes for the regular Neptune 4, the Neptune 4 Pro, the Plus, and the Max. If you've already been doing things with 3D printers in the past, then you're going to be able to handle this and tolerate it a little bit more. But if you're looking for something as a beginning level 3D printer and you are not the tinkering type and you don't want to be discouraged by having to fix things and look things up online in order to get good consistent prints, then you do not want to buy this printer or any other printer in the Neptune 4 line. So let me tell you why I feel this way about this printer. Let's start with the assembly. Now, first of all, putting this printer together, it's not difficult. It's not something that you need to be well versed in engineering or construction in order to do. But for a beginner, I think that it's just a little bit too much to start. For example, when you take it out the box, you're going to have to attach the gantry, which is basically just this part here. So it's connected through 4 long screws, but in order to put them on, you have to tilt the machine up. You have to put the screws through the bottom of the machine and just get it lined up with the gantry, and it's pretty much a blind installation. If you're trying to do it by yourself, you're going to be feeling around trying to make sure that you can get it inside of that hole, and then at the same time you're trying not to drop the base because it's tilted. You're trying to keep the gantry in place. You don't want to drop it and then it hits the table or hits the ground and something could get bent and it will screw everything up. So it's not the most intuitive installation process. Then once you get that on, you have to connect the print head, which is right here, which is just a few screws. That part is not difficult. You've got to attach this belt to the print head. Again, it's not a hard process to do. You're mostly just going to be taking parts and screwing them into the base of the printer. But if you think that that's going to take you 5 to 7 minutes to do and you've never done this before, then that's probably not going to happen. You're going to have to set aside 20, maybe even 30 minutes, especially if you're trying to follow along with a video to clarify something that may not be too clear in the instructions before you can get this printer fully assembled. But like I said, it's not hard to do. It's just more involved compared to some of the more modern 3D printers that you can get out there right now, especially some of the Core XY 3D printers that don't require a bunch of assembly, that are pretty much take it out of the box, remove a few screws that were put there for safety reasons, attach a screen and attach a spool holder, and you're pretty much good to go. The Neptune 4 still requires you to go through some of the older installation methods that you've seen in older 3D printers. It has not caught up to the modern age yet. Once you get through all that, you set it up, you turn it on, and you're ready to go, then you have to go through the leveling process. And that's where this printer's technology also starts to show its age. On the 4 Plus, you have these 6 wheels on the bottom of the build plate that you use to level or tram the bed. And you're going to have to go through that process in order to get the ball rolling on having some good, consistent prints. Because even though this printer features automatic bed leveling, that's not necessarily 100% accurate. You still have to do manual leveling to get it started. You need to take the piece of paper and then you need to go to each of these points on the bed and you have to lower the nozzle and raise the nozzle by spinning these wheels clockwise or counterclockwise until you can get some friction on that paper. Then you move on to the next wheel. You move on to the next wheel. And then the whole goal is to get as close as you can to an equal amount of friction on all 6 wheels. On all 6 places on the build plate. And that requires going back and forth because you'll get one corner feeling pretty good, but then you'll go to the next corner, you get that set, but then the first corner is thrown off again. So you'll be going around and around trying your best to get everything as even as possible. Then you can run the auto leveling procedure, which makes the print head go around and it's going to probe the bed in specific points and is basically going to compensate for any variances in the bed so that when you're printing, it'll know that one spot may be a little bit higher than the other and it'll compensate for that. And then once you go through all that, you have to set the Z offset, which is the distance between the nozzle and the bed, using that paper method again. Now this screen is going to be on and you'll be able to incrementally lower or raise the nozzle and you're just going to be feeling for that friction. And when you get it to the point where you think that it's good, you can save it and then everything at that point is going to be fine. At least it should be fine. And that's when I encountered my most consistent issue with this printer. And it's not an isolated problem. You can look it up and there's plenty of other people talking about it as well. For some reason, this printer does not want to remember the Z offset that you give it if you turn the printer off. When it's on and you set the Z offset and you go to do a print, everything can be fine. But the moment I turn this printer off and turn it back on, it doesn't remember the Z offset, which means every time I start a new print, the nozzle is going to be too far off the bed. And that's going to cause the filament to not stick to the build plate. It's going to be quite stringy and I have to make sure that I stop it. Otherwise, there's a good possibility that the filament will start to get wrapped around the nozzle and then it'll form the blob of death. So I start a print with this, and as it's printing the first skirt or the first layer of something, I have to stop it. I take the filament off, then I redo the Z offset to the point where I think it's going to be good, and then I'm able to print consistently back to back to back good. I'll be able to print without the nozzle being too far from the bed, and the prints will come out pretty good only until I turn the printer off again. I've looked up ways to try to fix this issue, and unfortunately there are many different solutions that people online give, but they are not very beginner friendly solutions. These are all things that involve going into the printer configuration files, things like tilt, screw, adjust, things that a regular normal beginner might be intimidated to actually do because you just want to put in a USB stick and just print the things from the USB stick. You don't want to go into Clipper and figure out what these values mean and change this to that. That is too advanced for a beginner to do, and it can be really off-putting for their first 3D printer. And that's why I'm saying that I don't think that this is a very good beginner 3D printer. Because in addition to the assembly and fiddling with these wheels and then the Z offset not working properly, I think it's just a little bit too much for a beginner to do, and it could put them off on the hobby of 3D printing because they may think that this is what it's like, and it doesn't have to be that way. It can actually be a lot more simple and a lot more enjoyable than that. And unfortunately, the Neptune 4 series of printers do not offer that kind of seamless experience compared to some of the other more modern Core XY printers that are available right now. Another reason why I think that these printers are not very beginner friendly is the way that the firmware updates are handled. Now on the Neptune 4 Plus and the Neptune 4 Max, they can connect to the internet via Wi-Fi or Ethernet. It comes with a Wi-Fi antenna that you can just screw in. Now in 2024, you would think that in order to do a firmware update, you would just go into the settings, tell it to look for a firmware update, and if there's one available, it can download and automatically install. But that's not how this machine works. You're going to need access to a micro SD card and you're going to need access to a USB stick, because when you update this printer, you need to get the update directly from Elegoo on Elegoo's website. And to update the printer itself, you need to use the USB stick to plug it into the front of the printer, and you need to run that to install. But then you also need to update this screen separately. And the way that you do that is you have to take off these screws, and on the inside of this is a spot for a micro SD card, and then you put the update for the screen inside of the screen, and then it updates that way, and then you'll be good to go. That is very convoluted for a way to update firmware in 2024. You should just be able to just do it over the internet from the printer without any other input, rather than confirming that you want to update. You shouldn't have to go to the website and download anything and unscrew anything to update. But that's just what I mean when I says that this is still using some of that old world tech that is pretty inconvenient compared to some of the other things that you can get today. Now, I know I've been really hard on this printer so far, and it seems like I just don't like it, but that's not true. I don't dislike this printer. I just want to make it clear the limitations that it offers if you're not really familiar with this kind of thing, or if you're just looking for an experience that's a lot more plug and play that doesn't have to deal with a whole lot of fiddling. But with that, I can talk about some of the things that I do like about this printer. Some of the things that I like about this printer, first of all, is going to be the cooling. There is a fan in the print head, but then you also see this big beast right here. This is also a fan that you can choose to turn on, or you can leave it off if you want. And then this just provides extra cooling. And when this fan is on, if you're standing kind of close to the printer, you can just feel it. You can feel that air just hitting you, you know, and it makes things louder. But I really like the fact that they included this additional fan right here so that you can get some better cooling. And it kind of looks pretty cool as well. It's like a jet engine in the back. It's pretty cool. I also like the fact that this has lights. There's LED lights on the top of the gantry, and then there's also a light on the bottom of the print head. And you can activate those separately. So if you're printing in the dark, it's kind of cool to be able to see the printer printing in a dark room lit by the light of the gantry, and then the little spotlight on the bottom of the print head. It's very nice. It's something that I wish all 3D printers had, just that extra illumination. That's really cool as well. Another thing that I like about this printer is how quickly the nozzle heats up. It does not take long at all for you to get from like 0 degrees Celsius up to 200 degrees Celsius. Just really a handful of seconds and you'll be pretty much there. The bed does not heat as quickly as the nozzle, but it doesn't take terribly long for the bed to heat up either. I like that about it as well. So it helps to get the prints going more quickly. I also like the fact that this printer runs Clipper, and even though Elegoo kind of tainted it a bit with their own thing, it's still Clipper at its core, and I can still access Fluid from my desktop, and I'll be able to upload prints to this printer remotely. I don't even use a USB stick to start printing. I do it all over the internet. So I like the fact that I can access that. I can look at the bed mesh. I can look at my web camera that's connected to it. I can use Octo Everywhere to do some other software-based things that I normally wouldn't be able to do just with the base software that the printer has. So I like that they're doing that. I do wish that it was pure Clipper and not the Elegoo Elegoo-rized version of Clipper, but it's still Clipper nonetheless, and I like that they included that. And then perhaps most importantly, the thing that I like most about this printer is that it does print well. If you can get beyond the issues with the Z offset or any other potential issues that you might personally encounter that I haven't encountered, when things are actually printing, it does a good job at printing them. So right now, let me show you some of the things that I've printed on this Neptune 4 Plus. So at the beginning of this video, I said this was a helmet class 3D printer, so I thought it would be only appropriate to show you a couple of helmets that I printed out on here, starting with this Spider-Man 2099 helmet. Now, this is a very popular model that you can find for free on printables. I'll leave a link in the description so that you can see it. And I want to bring particular attention to the white part of the helmet, the base part of the helmet, because that is what was printed on this machine. The red parts that go over the eyes, those were not printed on this machine, and then the black inserts for the eyes were also not printed on this machine. So if we just look at the white part, you can see how clean it is, especially since it has all of these really small octagon shapes all around it. And it just came out so smooth and so clean. And kudos to the designer of this helmet for putting together something that looks so wonderful, because this is definitely a favorite over on printables. So really great design, but the way that this printer handled this helmet was just absolutely wonderful. There's been no finishing on anything that I'm going to show you today. No sanding, no paint, no nothing. This is just raw right off the build plate. And as you know, with helmets, on occasion, you're going to have to do a little bit of post-processing work sometimes, depending on how much of a quality product you're trying to display in order to really bring out the potential of these pieces. But just raw off the build plate, this helmet looks absolutely fantastic. Another helmet that I printed out is this Batman helmet. This is the Flashpoint Batman helmet, which would explain the red eyes that were not printed on this machine, but the helmet itself was. And this was printed in a couple of pieces, had the main part of the helmet, and then there's a back plate that was printed separately that I glued together. And again, if you're just looking for the smoothness of the final print, this printer delivered. You get real close, you can see that there is definitely room for improvement, but that is just how it is with FDM printers. Like I said, things like this you can sand to get rid of any layer lines and get it looking completely smooth, get it looking completely matte if that's the direction that you want it to go. Use filler primer, use all of that good stuff, but the raw product right off of the build plate, I think looks very nice indeed. And while we're talking about props, here is a weapon prop that I also printed on this machine. This is from the video game Helldivers 2, and this is one of the weapons that you can use in this game. And I forgot the name of this gun, but I'm pretty sure it delivers democracy and liberty to all of those who want it and those who aren't interested as well. So this comes in two different pieces. It printed as a left half and a right half on this machine. And I believe I even scaled it up and put together. You can see this thing is pretty freaking massive. No moving parts, is just a prop. And I printed this with Elegoo's matte black PLA, and it came out looking very nice. And I think that this may have been printed before I did some calibrations to the flow rate. I believe it may have been before, but even if this was after I did it, it still came out looking very nice and very smooth. For something that's a little bit more practical, this is just a regular phone stand. There's 1,000,001 different phone stands that you can download and print out, but I just wanted to bring attention to this because also this came out looking great and it came out looking smooth as well. And I can just bring my phone out real quick and just show that, you know, it's very effective. Even with a much thicker case, this still works for phones. You're holding it vertically, or if you just want to do it horizontally, it works either way. And looking at this, as far as stringing goes, there's very fine stringing, the type of stringing that you can get rid of with a heat gun or maybe even a stick lighter if you're quick about it so that you don't burn anything. And then all those wispy little filament strings just go away. They just completely vanish. But just as far as just feeling it, it's very smooth. There's no blobs, there's no anything like that. Just came out looking really great. And then for the figure parts of things, I'm a big fan of these big bricks Lego inspired minifigures, and the creator of these has a profile over on Maker World where there's a good number of Star Wars inspired Lego minifigures that are really big. So I decided to print out this Darth Vader. And this Darth Vader was also printed with Elegoo's matte black PLA, and the helmet, again, nice and smooth. It still does that thing with helmets when you get to the very top and you see the ringing at the top, so this is no different. But other than that, he looks really good. The body looks really good. The color parts on Darth Vader's, his armor or whatever, these were not printed on this machine. These were printed on my FlashForge Adventurer 5M for the little tiny smaller pieces, but the majority of him was printed on this machine. Everything that's black was printed on this machine. And again, you're looking at it, it looks very good. And these are some pretty decent sized prints, just to give you an example. And I also use this printer to 3D print some really cool HueForge art. I'm a big fan of HueForge because you can make some really nice looking artwork and it doesn't take a lot of filament. And although these behind me, these two pictures were not printed on this printer, here's a look at some that were, including one of my favorites, which is this Akira Toriyama autograph that was recreated as a 3D file that I printed out. It looks absolutely just fantastic. A couple different tributes to the late great Akira Toriyama. And then you'll also see this really cool Terminator 2 HueForge print that I made, as well as one or two others. Now, the biggest downside about using HueForge with this printer is that I've noticed that it does produce more fine stringing than, say, my other 3D printer, the FlashForge Adventurer 5M. Again, it's those really thin, wispy strings. So you can get rid of them easily, but I have realized that when I do make HueForge prints, I have to go back, just do a little bit of cleanup just so that I won't have to see those little thin strands, white strands that are like spider webs on the print itself. But it's not a huge deal breaker, especially since it's very easily fixed. So as you can see, it's possible for this printer to make some very nice quality prints. And if it doesn't print perfectly right out of the box for you, then you're going to have to dedicate a little bit of time to give this some TLC so that you can get to that point. But like I've been saying this entire review, the biggest problem is that if you're just starting out, it requires you to do things that a beginner may not want to do and things that can be intimidating to do. So I would not call this an unboxing plug and play machine. You set it up, you hope for the best, but if things don't work out perfectly, then you're going to have to go online, you're going to have to do some research to figure out what your problem is and what you can do to fix it. And if putting in that amount of work is something that you are not interested in, then I think you'll be better off looking for an easier to set up and get going 3D printer. And there's plenty of them out there, but Elegoo tends to get a lot of the attention. So if you got your eyes on this printer, you might want to look somewhere else. But if you don't mind, a little bit of work, you're going to roll the dice and hopefully you get one out of the box that doesn't have all these types of issues, then by all means go for it, because the cost of this machine in relation to the volume that you get is still one of the best deals right now that you can get in the 3D printing community. So you definitely have to give it credit for that. They have been able to keep these prices down on these machines to a point where it's approachable for people who want them, but just know what you're getting yourself into. So there you go, guys. That's my opinion on the Elegoo Neptune 4 Plus 3D printer. And if you have this printer and you want to share your experience that you've had with it, please feel free to leave your experience down in the comments, along with any other tips or tricks that you may have found out along the way. And if you like videos like this, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned, because I'll always have more coming. So till then, take care of yourselves. I'll speak to you soon.